citizenship through somehow explaining that your heritage is Sephardic and that this somehow entitles one to claim against EU citizenship through Spain, right? I don't know much about this process at all. I'm just wondering, how does one's application for that get denied? I mean, what are the criteria involved? You may not know the details of it, but it feels like reverse limpieza de sangre.
Yeah,
like telling you your blood is too clean. Sorry.
I mean, there is a certain irony in this fact that you basically are on the basis of this ancestry having to try to show the connection. I mean, the idea of the laws was to give a type of compensation to rectify this historic injustice. And so the idea is it's to descendants of Jews who were expelled or I guess who were converted and then suffered in the Inquisition. What's interesting is there are differing interpretations that were given by Portugal and Spain, and I didn't have time to get into it. They defined kind of the practice a bit differently. Did you have to speak Ladino or not? Do you have to have an a connection to Spain and Portugal or both? Or for example, Portugal was either you could be Spanish or Portuguese. Spain was more Spanish. Also, is it just is it a surname that has to be vetted by a committee? A lot of the details and the criteria are really opaque. I mean, there are people who speak Ladino. I've met them in various cities. They speak Ladino. They obviously know they're Sephardic, and yeah, their applications were denied. Even, for example, in the Sephardic communities of Seattle, Turkish and Rhodes.
Yeah.
But no one really knows
from
why.
Seattle, and I
Oh,
know
yeah.
people in Seattle who, when I was young and innocent, and I didn't understand what Ladino was, but they thought of themselves as Greek because their families had left Spain and gone to Greece. And so, like, the idea, it's a very strange thing that the Spanish government or the Portuguese government would consider this to be somehow.
Well, on the other side, though, I'd say, Germany, Austria have offered a type of citizenship now for Jews who have, if you can show your grandparents, great-grandparents were
Yeah,
stripped.
it's just that the Spanish state as a thing didn't exist at the time of the expulsion. It's a very odd. It's like it feels to me like what are the who felt that they had the authority to empower themselves to judge the ancestry of Ladino speakers or something, like how did they get the chutzpah to sort of say, we're going to tell you you are or are not Sephardic enough to be Spanish?
And I think that goes to the sense there was a great sense, if you still talk to people in Seattle, but it's other places, there's a sense of disloyalty and a sense kind of a betrayal. I would say that they offered it and then they took it away. And the fact that, again, these laws are designed to rectify injustices of 500 years, and yet they've claimed it's achieved its historical purpose, remedial purpose within 5 years, 10 years, and now it's done. That's why many people think it wasn't genuine, really. To begin with, they never expected the sheer number of applications, hundreds of thousands.
So there's a question over here.
Yes, has DNA ever been mentioned?
In terms of the applications for the laws, to my knowledge, that's not a basis. I mean, that might help supplement, perhaps, but you have to. Again, I'm not an expert in the law. Again, I don't even know anyone who is. I mean, who's really deciding this? I don't know myself, but it can help in a sense, maybe show. But more important is the surname. Do you speak? Again, this is what I understand. Do you speak Ladino? Do you have a tradition? Also vetted by. This actually goes to a question too. It had to be approved, for example, by a rabbinic community or rabbi of your own community. I certify the applicant is of Sephardic heritage, and that's a big question too. There's actually competing interpretations even in Portugal. Lisbon and Porto. The law is designed to benefit descendants of Jews. Well, most of the descendants are not Jewish, arguably, at least a fair number of them. So you're actually giving citizenship to Catholics who are living in, say, principally South America, not practicing Sephardic Jews, which is also ironic. So Lisbon had this thing, well, the purpose of the law is to benefit descendants. You don't have to be a practicing Jew. Porto said, we want to give it to practicing Jews, professing Jews And, you know, you may have heard that big scandal that erupted a couple of years ago, and then they granted citizenship to one of the Russian oligarchs. And well, could he prove that he's a descendant of Sephardic Jews? You know, there's always the allegation, the rumor, that there were Sephardic Jews who made their way over to Poland or Eastern Europe at some point, which may well have happened, but how do you document that? How do you prove that? And he got somehow certified by the community over there. I think it might have been a Chabad rabbi. Well, he held himself out, and his family's always been told they're Sephardic, so therefore he is Sephardic. These are real questions, but as I said, it's no longer in effect.
No, I mean, I'm interested in this partly because of the German comparison, where I have a great deal of experience and know a lot about what's going on there. And two things strike me about it. I mean, yes, it's gone now, and the question of what does does 5 years count, whatever. I have a different set of questions. So one is the focus on the surname, and then the question of practice. I mean, the surname assumes, first of all, patrilineal descent, right? It also assumes that there's essentially no intermarriage over 500 years. And of course, this isn't largely, there's a lot of endogamy, right, in these communities, but I guess I'm partly curious about that. Like, does maternal descent count for anything? Do you have to be 100%? I mean, we'd be talking about, I don't know, we're talking about a lot of generations, if you're really, presumably they're not being, when it was, and again, you may not know this level of detail, how much descent do you have to demonstrate? How many great-grandparents, if we're gonna get to racial laws here, how many grandparents have to be Jewish for you to be Jewish?
Well, actually, the racial laws are not applied by the law of the nationality, are applied by, Orthodox or religious Jews.
Right.
Because they are the ones saying you have to have certain amount of, you have to prove this and this and this, but the law is different. The first thing is that this is not the first time that Spain, in the case of Spain, is granting nationality based on Sephardic traditions. The first time was in the 1920s, right? When they started to really collect the family through the Spanish embassies around the world, especially in the Mediterranean, Greece, Egypt, Turkey. They started to collect the names of these families, because this family is true, they kept their traditions, right? And in certain way, the mentality, the nationality mentality, the nation mentality of Spain at that time started to follow these people around. You talk about Pulido at the end of the 19th century, so there was a Philo-Sephardic movement at the time, right? So Spain wanted to really know who these people are, and they started to collect lists of names from these places. For example, I know of the list of Egypt. There is list also in Greece and Turkey, right? And then when these people started to go to Barcelona, one of the myths that are around Franco dictatorship is that he created a list of all the Jews living in Spain at that time, okay, and all the list of people that were Philo-Sephardic or Philo-Jewish at that time, right? So the mystic of the list is coming from there, from the history of the Spanish government creating lists of people who are descendants of the Sephardic Jews, because it's true that these communities were close communities in the places where they went to: Turkey, Greece, Egypt, Morocco, other places. It's true that they kept those traditions in those places. So this is to just to mention that the law, the 2015, is a law that is not coming out of the blue. There is a history there with the Spanish government of attracting Sephardic Jews in different moments, right? The other moment was in the 1950s, with Franco wanted to be part of the international community. He was, as everybody knows, he was an ally of Hitler. But in the 1950s, suddenly he was friends with the Jews, right? And he started to really attract many Jews, especially from Morocco and other places, to Spain. And he started to, in fact, he was the one created the Sephardic Museum in Toledo. It was created in 1964. It was authorized by Franco, the same person that decades ago were persecuting Jews. So there is a complex history here with the name and with everything. But regarding the law itself and of the requirement of the law, they were different, as you said, in Portugal and Spain, but it's also based on what we were mentioning yesterday about a strong tradition in Spain, especially in certain places, of them being Jewish beyond practicing Judaism. And this is very strong in Spain, and this in certain areas of Spain, and cannot be denied for that. There is also a history there, right? That, some people will say, oh no, this or that, but if you go there, you are the one who are not Jewish. And I think that there is a very beautiful story by Schwartz in the 1920s when he was hearing about these crypto-Jewish communities in Belmonte and northeast Portugal, and he went there, and until he didn't say the Shema with the woman of the community, he was not accepted into the community. People didn't give them any information about the Jewish history, about prayer books, about anything, until they made sure that he was what he claimed to be. And he was a Jew, a Polish Jew, right? So, because for them, the only Jews remaining on earth were the Sephardic Jews of that area. So for them, nobody can tell them you are not Jewish, because they know they are. And this is something that happens even today. You go to Carçao, for example, you go to Vimioso, you go to Bragança, right? And other places in that area, and people have a strong feeling about the Jewishness as an ancestry. And this is also part of the culture that is coming to this law. Because I was talking to Ari earlier today, and it's saying that there is the law that was implemented in 2015 has a history behind of reparation, symbolic reparation for this community, right? And we have to say, yes, there are Sephardic communities in Venezuela, in Seattle, in Los Angeles, Mexico, Argentina. I mean, these are strong Sephardic communities, and these people were asking for some kind of reparation, right? And this is something that I think is explaining the background of the law is important for the scholars that are here.
So we only have about 3 minutes remaining, so I don't know if there's another relatively short question that people would like to ask. I do think this question about on what basis citizenship could be sort of granted around this opportunity, right? That seems to have been what's the phrase they use, sort of sunset, right?
It functionally ended, and then basically officially ended finally in Portugal.
Right.
At least it's voted, then they had the elections, and they're forming governments.
And it's worth noting that in the context of the COVID pandemic, that also seemed to have been an obstacle for several people who were applying for citizenship and were not able to physically be present to sign the papers, et cetera, et cetera. So many complications, but the fact that the door was closed in the context of the pandemic is also really quite interesting, I think. And so all of these factors, and to what extent it was related to, frankly, not getting applicants from, frankly, the part of the world where they're expecting to see a lot of applicants, et cetera. Yeah, I think that's a very interesting.
And I guess it just also, again, reaffirms the question of what is Jewish?
Right.
And what is this identity? Is it biological descent? Is it belief? Is it practice? Is it, the external definition, the imposition? You're a Jew because I say you're a Jew, and that's it. And effectively, in a way, it's almost what happened, right? We're deciding who is a Jew for purposes of the law,
right.
Our descendant. And you can't review it, you can't appeal it. I mean, I wanna say Kafkaesque, I mean, he's an inquisitorial-esque
I
guy.
mean, I'm tempted to say it's very imperialist nostalgia. You know, like, our gift to you for having expulsed and oppressed your people is to offer you citizenship in our country. It's bizarre.
Exactly. And honestly, it's also very interesting because it's not just citizenship, it's specifically dual citizenship. You did not have to renounce your other citizenship, right? Which means that you could have the two passports.
I think the other thing was too, is that at least in Portugal, right, you didn't have to speak the language, you didn't have to visit, you didn't have no residency requirements. You just, I'm the descendant and therefore that entitles me to, by right, it's a reclamation, right? So.
Cool at a certain level, but weird.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
I know we're down to the final minute and a
Yeah.
half, but, okay, so this was so wonderful. I know that you've been working on this, but I wasn't aware of the depth of study that you've done and the impact that you've had with that. Really, the way in which you've brought pride around this topic to the community is such a wonderful example of how we as humanists can be relevant in a very broad sense. So thank you for that. Thank you for that. The quick question that hopefully we'll have a very quick answer is there was not an awareness of Jewish history in Zamora when you started this project, as I understand. Was there any resistance as you, okay, and you know, if you could just very briefly mention that, because it seems that the project has really been embraced by this point. But
At this point, yeah. Yes, but it wasn't that way at the beginning.
Hmm.
All right. The only book talking about the Jewish history of Zamora that was published before we started the conferences in 2013 was in 1992. The last significant thing done about the use of Zamora before 2013 was in 1992 as part of the celebrations that Spain did for the 500 years. There was an exhibition there in the city, and there was something like a book by a scholar from University of Salamanca, Maria Fuencisla Garcia Casar. She published a book about the use of Zamora, right? But since then, to 2013, nothing else have been done. Is contradictory because at the same time, the first conference that happened in Spain after Franco, dealing with the history of the Jews, happened in Zamora as well in 1981.
Whoa.
It was called it was a conference that was meant to be not only one but several under the premise of the forgotten Spaniards. Okay, and the first forgotten Spaniards were the Jews, and that was the only conference that was done. So it was in 1981, right? But yes, tensions many. I was talking to Ari earlier that politics there is very different than here. Everything there depends on the government. There is no tradition of philanthropy like here in the United States. In Spain, everything is about what the government funds, right? And like in many other places, they want these things to be brought to the city, but not too much, right? Yes, but not too much, right? And then we have run into those contradictions with many people. We have been able to work a lot there, only, and I have to say this, only because the people asked us to do it. Because I don't have the money, I didn't have the time, and I didn't have really anything, only that the family connection. But were the people there, when we did the first conference, that said, no. You have to do it. I said, okay, we can do this every 2-3 years. And they said, no. You have to do this every year. Every year. And we have been doing it for every single year. And Denise is witness here of what we have created there.
Yeah,
Right?
exactly. Yeah, I attended last year, and I was just so impressed by the sense that that the conference is a center of community interest, identity, right? That people go every year, and it was just so impressive how many people were turning out and had been there at the first conference as well.
And she's coming back next year.
And I'm coming back, exactly. And I just have to say that right now I'm working with Kirsten Kumpfbala and the Anne Frank Initiative to create an Iowa City Jewish Heritage Walk, to a huge extent inspired by what Jesus accomplished in Zamora. And so I'm hoping that we will also be able to sort of build models, like take inspiration and build models here in Iowa City so that we can also be really celebrating the Iowa City heritage around this as well. So thank you all very much. As it happens, we're going to be doing a fledgling walk in about a half an hour. And so we do probably need to take a break and rest a little bit. But thank you so much for coming, and thank you, Dr.
Now, where is the wine?